Nick, have you ever, I mean, like, you're pretty cool, I'm pretty cool, but are you ever get your finger bitten off by a chimp on the movie set? Because no one is as cool as Jennifer Connelly. Fun fact, during the last scene of the movie that Jennifer Connelly shares with the chimp, it did bite her finger off.
There is a monkey in this movie.
She had to go and get it reattached.
Yeah.
So we are never going to be as cool as Jennifer Connelly in today's film Phenomena from director Jarvis.
That would have been a phenomenon, right? Yeah, phenomenon, right? I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast.
I'm Kyle Goethe from GoetheFilmReviews.com. We're talking Phenomena today on Kyle and Nick on Film. Join us. Welcome back to the show. I'm Kyle.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. I would like to thank our new patron, Brian Eggert, to the show. Thank you for your contributions. I'd also mention a new show that one of my fans, friends of the show, The Last Comic Shop. They've been running my promo for my comic book, and definitely want to give a shout out to them. Look them up on YouTube and anywhere you find podcasts. They critique comic book reviews, and they're just fun, really fun guys to talk about. And of course, they have a few women as well. So, today we're talking Dario Argento's 1985 film.
Yes, Phenomena. Phenomena is the story of Jennifer Corvino, daughter of a famous actor who's sent to a boarding school in Switzerland, which is always a great sign.
Yeah, especially in an Argento film, yeah.
She's a gifted child, though, and she seems to be able to communicate with insects in some way, but she also struggles with sleepwalking. When someone starts killing the students, Jennifer teams up with a Scottish entomologist and a chimpanzee to try and uncover the culprit and escape unscathed.
Okay, fun fact, when I was in film school and talking about arts and film and all that stuff, one of my close friends, I can't remember his name, we were talking about famous directors, and I said, I'm a big fan of Brian De Palma. And he's like, well, have you seen a Dario Argento film? He's very much like Brian De Palma. And that's how I got introduced to Dario Argento, was when I was in college and film school and watched a lot of Dario Argento films that don't really have the same titles in the movie stores that we have seen now. I think it was actually called Creepers if you found it in the video stores. But we're going to talk about Dario Argento, and this is a great one to start out with because it's a blend of two things that he always goes. One, he goes into fantasy supernatural or the murder mystery, the Galileos. And here it's a blend of both.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about Phenomena is it feels to me as if someone told Argento, this is the last film you'll ever make, so you do everything that you've always wanted to do. Because that's maybe its biggest strength and its biggest curse is that it's a lot. It's the most Argento film.
I agree.
Probably of them all.
This is a great selection to start. Here, you get a lot of things that you see mostly in a lot of Dario Argento films. You get heads through glass, you get broken glass, you get kind of a mystery involved, you get a lot of supernatural, a lot of wind, a lot of weather, and overabundance of play with the women, right? Women in movies and roles and stuff like that, and a lot of murdering and a lot of small people.
And you get his two most famous genres, the giallo murder mysteries and the witch fairy tale kind of stuff at the same time.
Even though there's not really witches in here,
but this is a very fairy tale.
Act like it, right? Yeah.
And then you also get Goblin, which you can't really do Argento without Goblin.
So if you didn't really. You didn't know, he uses the musical band Goblin a lot to do the musical scores for his films. Also, you have a signature murdering weapon, usually in Dario Argento film. There's a signature murdering weapon, and here, it's like a knife on a staff or something like that. But it's like components almost,
It reminded me of the Reed and the Lone Wolf and Cub series, which was it was a bar that was pushing the kid's cart, but he could pull it off and it would shoot a blade out the end and he could whip people with it. It was very Darth Maul lightsaber-ish almost.
But here, this is one of the best intros he ever done. It definitely rivals what he did with Suspiria. You get a lot of wind, of course. You get a lot of weather. But the beginning of them going on the bus, and that sweeping scape of them in Switzerland, it's a fantastic shot. But it's long takes. Maybe 4 or 5 takes before she gets to the house.
Yep, exactly. Well, and
it's real daughter too.
You mentioned Creepers as well. Creepers actually, and I must point out, if you get a chance to watch the film, I highly suggest you check out the integral cut, which is the original 116-minute edit. The Creepers edit is only 83 minutes.
Right.
They chop a significant portion out in order to Americanize it, but in the process, they also reordered many of the scenes in the film, which, I don't think, I've been told it doesn't ruin the experience, but it definitely loses the style of it. And they also lost the rights to the Iron Maiden music that's used in a lot of the other musical numbers weren't available for the U.S. release because they had to renegotiate the rights they chose not to. So if you get the chance, I don't even know if you can find a copy of the Creepers edit anywhere, but I would avoid that. If you can watch this film in the 116-minute integral cut, please do so, because that's the best version, or the 110-minute international cut that went to every other country other than the U.S.
What really works in this movie is actually Jennifer Connelly, babyface Jennifer Connelly. This is before I think she even did The Labyrinth.
Yeah, it's got to be before that.
But here, of course, her name is, and the character's name is Jennifer. But yeah, her affection. I don't know if she trained, but it seems that she has no problem with insects on her hands, even though her character is supposed to be a connection, a telekinetic connection with insects. But you're handling insects in the movie.
Yeah.
Did they have an insects trainer?
Well, and I got to assume that those were her real hands, at least for the most part, because, I mean, when you watch, like, Halloween and they do the hand thing and it's clearly an adult's hand when Michael Myers is murdering his sister.
But there is a hand scene in this, and we'll get to it, where it's definitely not the hand. But
I do think, Jennifer Connelly is very strong in this movie. She's one of those people who you almost would be forgiven for not knowing she was a child actor, because... You know, unless you've seen Labyrinth, unless you've seen, you know, even Rocketman, or Rocketeer, she was very young in that.
Good catch.
She was very young in this. You'd be forgiven for not knowing that she was a child actor. My first experience with her was actually in the movie Hulk, and then after that, I saw Requiem for a Dream, which gives you a whole different viewpoint of Jennifer Connelly. But like, I never knew about any films prior to that, until kind of college or even past.
But here she has this is the great reveal that's almost rivals Firestarter with Drew Barrymore, with the wind blowing in her hair, and she's like, I care about all of you, but because we have to have this Dario Argento, we have a wind. I like another trope that you always see in the Dario Argento is crane shots, unnecessarily crane shots, but of course, we have a crane, so why don't we use it? And in the opening credits, you have this, let's go here, let's go here, let's go here, which is another trope that you always see with Dario Argento films, and he also incorporates it. But you also have it in the house as well. Well,
Argento's kind of like he's kind of like the Max Bialystock of like horror directors, where if you've got it, flaunt it. Like if he's got these tools, he's going to put them forth, and he's going to like make use of them. And that's why that overindulgence kind of comes with his territory. That you can watch one of those films and you could say, okay, we're getting over the top, but that's kind of the beauty of it. And that's why you can forgive some of the problems that, you know, I've before I showed my wife Suspiria, I kind of warned her ahead of time about the dubbing. Because it's like that very obvious dubbing, where sometimes they would even have other people who aren't the main actors dubbing the role, and it's like, you know, hits you over the head. And I said, that could take you out of the movie. I'm warning you ahead of time. And she ended up loving the movie, thankfully. But it's kind of that thing where you forgive some of those kind of weird, quirkier choices, because it's Argento. He just kind of does his own thing, and he's an auteur for that reason.
One thing, I love Argento, but one of the things that I love about him is he makes sure the shot looks well, even though it doesn't really fit into like a reality, like the police investigating down in Pleasance. But the guy's gonna stand in the open stairwell with the light. It's shot beautifully, but it doesn't really make sense. But in the world,
he would never be there doing that conversation,
right? But he's standing by the open windows, and the wind's blowing, and the light is perfectly. But he's standing there almost immaculate. But it's like this: the police talking to him, right?
Yeah,
and that's the fitting of Argento's style. Overcomes sense of like grounding of reality.
Yeah, and I would argue that his style is stronger than his substance, and the style saves the substance in some ways, because some of his stories, if you really broke down plot point by plot point, they're very rote, very similar to other films that we've seen. It's again like that element of every story ever made has been told already. We're just, how are you telling it here? And I think what's funny is that he tells a lot of the same stories himself, especially with his giallo films, where there's the murderer and there's the weapon, and you could almost predict beat by beat. And even most of the time when he has a reveal of like who the killer is in his different movies, you don't really care. Like I never, there's only one of his films I remember when they revealed the killer and I was like, oh. And like, you don't care because the style is so strong that it doesn't matter.
The process is, the fun and enjoyment is how we get there. And I've watched this movie several times, and even with the reveal, when it finally gets to where it gets its hands dirty, like literally get its hands dirty, when we're going to plunge in the filth, because the entire movie looks actually beautiful. It's really shot beautiful. They really did a lot of good cinematography. I wouldn't be surprised if they had gigantic wind fans outside blowing the leaves.
Well, if they were like low budget and they like waited for the wind to pick up, and they're like, all right, everybody on the set.
I was like, go, but I'm sure they had gigantic fans blowing outside even, and especially with shot at night. Here, I think Argento works well when he simplifies his palette. I know he went extravagant with like something with Suspiria with pops of color, and like Inferno or something like that, or Deep Red. But here he calms the palette down a little bit with like a lot of blues, a lot of greens, and you'll see an abundance of that throughout the film.
And it's funny because it's almost juxtaposed with the higher open-ended parts because of the Goblin score.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's very non-scored for most of its kind of just like meandering as you're moving through the story. And I do think this film indulges itself in time a little bit more. I would still prefer it over Creepers because of the reordering issue and because of the cuts for like graphic violence. I prefer this version of it still, but it does feel like a little bloated at times. But they kind of offset whenever the music kicks in. It kicks into overdrive, like your eardrums explode, and then you're like, "Oh, we're gonna get something crazy here," and then we get the sleepwalking moment, or we get her finding the fireflies in the bush, and it's kind of like every time that happens, you're like, "Oh, it's loud, it's gonna happen."
So I think Kyle was right. He explained it very well. This is a very overindulgent, Argento going overly indulgent with his saturation senses, right? With music and story. He's going to combine both what he likes, supernatural and murder mysteries. He's going to combine a lot of exterior, interiors, and they say, well, put animals in if you want trained animals, not then train insects. So
Yeah, well, and the seed for the idea of the film came about when Argento was reading that sometimes insects are used during murder investigations. And he kind of like ruminated on that for a while. And you can kind of see the elements of that where he had these two opposing ideas coming together. And of course, it's almost like Argento, if he hears something that has to do with a murder investigation, he's like, oh, I can make another Giallo film. And then he starts like writing immediately for it because he's got this seed that works. And I think the insect thing, so many people have a fear of insects. And in this film, rarely is the insect actually ferocious. It's only in the way that it's perceived. Most often we see it in a kind of, I don't want to say friendly mode, but like a kind of assistant protagonist, if you will.
I think the inside joke in like a lot of movie, we make a lot of movies. If you hire a cinematographer, they really like to do is work with mirrors, and Argento likes to work with glass and mirrors, and it's a really show off your talent and skills. But here in the movie, he makes sure the mirrors are covered up. I'm sure the cinematographer like, I want to show off. Can we just have run review? No, we're going to cover up the mirrors in this movie.
Yeah, and the cinematographer was Romano Albani, who I'm a huge fan of for one of his very, very under-discovered films, which is Terror Vision. I always preach Terror Vision, how great and psychedelic the cinematography there, and how it feels like a comedic version of an Argento film at times. You can see kind of those flourishes that are there, and even, like I said, even in those meandering scenes, they're gorgeously shot. And it's like you said, there's almost no reason for them to break so many rules. They break a ton of rules shooting this movie, especially, where they kind of break that 50-50 line, where you can't go on the other side of the two characters talking. He does it like throughout the film several times.
It's almost like somebody told him you can't do that, and of course he's going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of the rule of thumb of film is that there's all these rules, but when you break them too, there's an element of, yeah, you've earned it.
Right. But Argento, I say he gets a credit for just being a horror film, but he's actually an accomplished film director. Mm-hmm. I think even if you take out the subject matter, he's an accomplished film director. He knows how to shoot things. Mm-hmm. And especially you see a lot of his really good work of just simply having like Sophia and Jennifer having their dialogue in their room. He knows how to set it up, the scene where it seems interesting, and what's going on is probably the most boring part of the movie. Mm. But he puts it almost like Alfred Hitchcock. We do bird's eye view. We have the introduction of depth, and conversation is a lot of exposition. But he knows how to shoot it. He's a really accomplished filmmaker.
Yeah, exactly. And you can tell that in how he shoots what I think is that great sleepwalking dream sequence. Yeah. Where upon rewatching that sleepwalking sequence, all those images have a lot more impact, knowing where the film's kind of heading.
Right, the second time.
Yeah, and I think watching that happen right there is the way they juxtapose a very normal girl sleepwalking could be just kind of a boring thing, but like she goes on a journey. I mean, I think you could have given her the ring to Mordor and
she probably went
way home.
Instead of the firefly, right?
Yeah, like the only part of that whole dream sequence that didn't work for me as well was that moment where she kind of falls and gets caught on her clothing. Because there's that moment where she sways.
It's a little more ridiculous.
She sways, and in that sway, I was like, whee!
Right. The clothes save her.
Yeah, but I mean, I like that again. He goes and swings for the fences with this film, and it's too bad because again, having the cut of Creepers that we ended up getting, the 83-minute cut of this film, that film, the American version of it, is one of the reasons why he didn't get a lot of English language distribution later in life. This was one of the last major releases he had in the U.S. that you could find in the theater. And the problem was he didn't edit that version. It's not his movie, It's kind of frustrating because they edited his version, put it out, and then said, "Oh, it's bad. It must be his fault." You took his movie away.
Right. And then this is happening with the peak of his success in 1985, in the middle of the 80s, is where he's reaching for, almost a namesake, stardom. And especially when he's not American, he's doing it in Italy. And right, the process of what happened with this movie probably cut him underneath to really get in the upper epsilon of horror, not only just horror directors, but directors themselves.
What's funny is there's kind of an Americanization of like visuals in this film. There's some references that I felt, I don't know if they were done on purpose or done on accident, but I definitely saw their influences, like the girls kind of tormenting her felt like out of Carrie.
Right.
The plug it up scene from Carrie felt like that, where they're like, "Yeah, you're the insect girl," and it's like, and that kind of like cruelty that children can have towards each other.
Or I even wrote in my notes components of like Nightmare on Elm Street, which came out a year before this.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of influence, like nightmare-ish, when it's not really when normal stuff's going on.
Exactly. So it's kind of the most Americanly accessible, because you feel like you see elements of this movie elsewhere. I saw even parts of later films. Like Firestarter, like you pointed out, has a very like similar approach to how we use the powered girl kind of a motif. And then there's also even references to this film in the 2018 Suspiria, the remake. Where felt like there was some reference back to this kind of thing as well.
Right, especially the ending.
Yeah, exactly.
The ending of this movie, and if you see the remake of Suspiria, you get why we kind of like very similar. In a lot, I think even move ahead from this movie, like Hellraiser, you see a lot of references that I would even cite, because they have like even in the beginning, like chains are used.
Oh yeah.
And chains are almost supernatural, which is something they would use in Hellraiser later on.
Yeah, and I think the chain part for me too, the one kind of difficult thing about the film is that I watched it once and I want to go back and see it, yes. But I also think it's so open-ended with all of the different kind of elements that are squeezed together, that I felt like there was a lot of parts of it that were unneeded until I finished the movie, and I was like, well, those kind of belong, but like they kind of like hint at something. Like the chain part at the beginning doesn't come into play for another hour and 40 minutes,
Right,
and it's like by then you've kind of forgotten about it.
Because you've been over bombarded with
I really liked your Nightmare on Elm Street, and especially Nightmare on Elm Street 3 felt very much like influenced by this film, with kind of some of the revelations that we get from the different characters here.
I would add one more of them in the lake, and her in the water. It was all very much Friday the 13th.
Oh yeah. Especially I could see that being with the later film, Jason Lives, which has its finale on the lake of fire.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that you would recognize in this movie that started out with this movie, but been used before, and he incorporated with his style.
Exactly.
And of course, we get Donald Pleasance. If you're going to cite a lot of movies and use them, you're going to put Donald Pleasance in your movie.
Yeah, Blofeld himself. Well, one of the Blofelds.
One of the Blofelds. But here he looks a little bit exhausted chasing Michael Myers, and he's just going to hang out with the insects. Right.
Yeah. You got to wonder if that choice was made because, again, of that Americanization factor.
I think
something tells me that Argento was trying to reach a larger audience with this film, which again makes that sad part about the fact that we literally, we could say this, Creepers has been an American film longer than Phenomena, because Creepers came out on VHS in 1986. We didn't get an uncut version of Phenomena until 2017. That was where like the official home release of Phenomena's full cut was available. So we've actually had Creepers longer than we've had Phenomena. But yeah, the Americanization of having Donald Pleasance in this role being I kind of likened him to like the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the film, the wise character giving it guidance. Exposition king. And his very attractive wife Inga.
Yeah, and you get this very bizarre, even for an Argento film, this very bizarre death involved with him. And of course, he has the reason the monkeys in the movie. It's his trained monkey that's supposed to assist him, which is like, are you kidding me?
I'll put it like this: when comparing monkeys in horror films, I do put Inga above the monkey from Monkey Shines. No. So, like in all fairness, I would put that. New York Times credited Inga as being the best character in the movie, the best performance. They kind of gave a scathing review, so I don't know if I'm going to like completely pay with that, but I do think Inga is the best side character in the movie, which is quite a credit to give to a chimpanzee. Like from the moment that she introduced, you're like, this better have a purpose, and as that character keeps recurring throughout the film, it gets better and better, and that's why I credit the last 40 minutes of Phenomena are worth, like, if you're kind of toned out after an hour and you're not sure if you want to keep going, because it only gets
there are some lull scenes.
Yeah.
If you ever read the book, The Murders in the Rue Morgue, you understand why he put the chimpanzee in the movie. Because there's a lot of things borrowed that we've seen before. And of course, like Darryl and Pleasance. So it's like a mixture of everything. He put like all the ingredients in the pot, even in himself, like all the stuff that I like. I usually usually do supernatural. I'm going to put it all into this movie and just go. And another point of this is, I was going to get to it, but Donald Pleasance in the wheelchair is another thing of like detective always in a wheelchair too. So.
Well, and back in the 80s, I'm not saying that this is how you should view it now, but back in the 80s, when you put a character handicapped in a wheelchair, it was kind of like the neutering of that character, like symbolism.
It was right.
It was like you're trying to like remove that character from a physical
stationary,
standpoint.
right?
Yeah, we're like, and it's that could be one of the ways that Argento tried to tell us that like Donald Pleasance is not the creepy older guy because he's in the wheelchair.
So
and again, I'm not saying
the
that
murder's
that's okay,
out there
but
wandering around. So you're supposed to say he can't be.
Yeah, well, he's the exposition force. He's the driving character development for Jennifer. It's almost like he's the catalyst that changes her, but we're not directly supposed to be following him, and they kind of like let us know with that.
Yep.
I really liked his characterization of the film, although I mean it's Scottish.
It's kind of like
it's kind of bad, but like at the same time, he's an actor that even his presence in a film elevates the film. Even when it's not a great accent, I would not have chosen anyone else for the role.
No. So overall, what I'm saying is you'll enjoy this movie for the reasons it got a bad review in the 80s, because we were immense in the slasher genre. We want to see something new, something fresh, something original about slasher films, and here is putting all the tropes, including Dario Argento's own tropes, in this movie. So what you probably appreciate it now is probably why I got criticized when it came out.
Yeah, when Argento stated himself that he was at this space from about 82 onwards where he felt comfortable referencing his own work. And kind of poking fun at his own work, which you can
even
see that
plagiarizing almost himself, right? Yeah.
Well, he often, like I said, he often does tell similar stories, especially when you get to his murder stories. There's a lot of similarities in a lot of his murder stories, but he tells them with such an interesting way. And even though, again, the style is all very similar, it's a slightly altered style every time, which makes going back to these murder stories so much fun, even if you don't really care who the bad guy is at the end of the movie. Interesting note, though. As we come to a kind of a close here, there was talk of a sequel in 2001. Nick, what would you want from a sequel?
Oh, we have to figure out some way to incorporate Ant-Man in it. I'm sorry.
I mean, yes, but then you have to wonder, like, well, Jennifer Connelly was at least in her 20s at this point, so that would make it slightly less creepy to have Ant-Man.
Right, yeah. So, all right, have you seen Phenomena?
Yeah, let us know in the comments section down below.
If you have if you follow us on our social media, if you have a copy of Creepers VHS, show us, because I haven't seen it in a long time.
Yeah, let us know. I found the old Creepers trailer and I watched it and I was like, such a terrible title for it too.
Right, yeah.
But let us know in the comment section down below, and where's kind of your Dario Argento ranking for this film? I haven't seen a lot for him to be one of the directors I really enjoyed. I've only seen 4 features, 5 if you count his Masters of Horror film Jennifer, and I would put this film right in the center of that, where it's better than some, but it's not as strong as his best.
That's why I say it's a good start, because it is kind of the center of everything that he's done, and it's the peak of his career, and it's a really good bullseye for what you want to know about Dario Argento.
Fabulous, yeah. So let us know your thoughts below. Don't forget you can like, you can subscribe, you can check out that Patreon like Deep Focus Reviews did. Level 2 and up means that you get to help contribute to getting a shout out every single episode.
Yeah.
You get to get on a rotation of Patreon selected videos, and you get to help ask questions during our monthly Q&A sessions. So we really do appreciate all you guys for checking that out. Once again, you can find all my film reviews on goatfilmreviews.com.
You can find the St. Paul Filmcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can also find the Last Comic Shop anywhere you find podcasts.
Perfect. And until next time, I guess. There's a bee. There's a bee.
Oh!